Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So today I am going to be showing you guys how I make my very own incense cones. Now to do this, you basically will need 4 ingredients. I've got them right here. So you want a fuel, an herb, something that will burn really well. I ended up taking some lavender and I powdered it in my mill. I've still got some larger pieces in there, so I will need to sift that out. So I found the finest powder tends to burn a little bit better and more consistently than the bigger pieces. So I will still need to sift this. And then you will need something that's going to act as a glue. Resin, pine resin, I used this from my tree. I ended up just crushing it with a hammer and then rolling it out with a rolling pin, and that tended to powder this tree resin up really well. And this will help glue and hold all the powders together. The very next thing you will need is something that's going to act as your binder. Now your binder can be any kind of like a liquid. I like using alcohol because the alcohol definitely evaporates faster, so your cones get drier sooner. And alcohol really tends to break down the pine resin very nicely, so everything will stick and hold together kind of like a dry clay. And you can use an essential oil if you want to. That is optional. I like using it because it brings out the scents in my herbs just a little bit more, and I just like doing that. So once you have your ingredients handy, you'll want to have some kind of a mold. I ended up picking up an incense cone mold on Amazon. This works really well, but I found there was a problem using it, in that because I'm using resin and everything's sticky and wants to stick together, filling this up and packing it was quite difficult, trying to get the cone back out in one piece. So if you use something like this, make sure that you make some kind of a liner. And I've got several liner cones that I made here that just fit perfectly inside there. You want to make sure that there are no holes in the bottom when you go ahead and do this, so that way when you do press your powders and stuff in the bottom, that when you pull your liner back out, the tip doesn't accidentally break off in your mold, and that way you can get it all in one go. So that's important. I just made my liners out of some wrapping paper, so 2 inches by 3 inches. That tend to work really well for me. Because this has got a wider base and a very narrow top, I ended up just taking it long ways, folding it around, and just taping it in place. And again, you want to make sure that there are no holes at the bottom. The next thing you'll want to make sure you have is some kind of a sifter. This will help make sure that you get fine powders when you do your work. Of course you want a mixing bowl. You can use your fingers when you mix your powders and stuff together, or you can use like a wire whisk, which is great. Once you are done cleaning up, you'll want to make sure that you have either an alcohol or like a nail polish remover, something that is going to be able to break down the resin so everything stays nice and clean once you are finished. I don't have enough cones, so I'm going to go ahead and make some more of these. And like I showed you, I'm just going to take the paper, take it long ways, and then I'm just going to wrap it and roll it around my finger. I'm going to kind of match up the edges just a little bit, make kind of like a little nun's hat. And that will kind of work. I don't have any hole in the tip, so now I'm going to take my incense cone mold and I'm going to try and fit that paper liner inside my cone. I'm going to check to make sure I don't have a hole, and I kind of do. So I'm going to just tighten that paper up just a bit. Stick this back in there. Check it. I'm pleased with that. That's good. So then I'm going to hold it in place, just kind of pinch it with my finger and thumb. Take a little bit of tape. Cut a nub of it off. And just tape across the spot where the papers join up. And that will hold perfectly fine for what we're doing here. I am in the process of just sifting through my lavender because I want to get all of those chunkier pieces out and just used a fine powder, so I'm just going to put a little bit in my strainer and just tap it against my hand, and hopefully we will get the very, very fine powder that we can extract to use for these incense cones. And one of the things I really like about the incense cones is you can use them for many, many, many different purposes. One of them being medicinally, like if you have asthma or you have some kind of a reaction to something, you can actually use these cones and put them in like a tin, say like an Altoids tin, and then you can have them ready and on the go to be able to treat someone medicinally if you need to. They are very lightweight, they are small, they don't take up much space at all, so that's really cool about them. You can also use them, I think I already said it, to make your house smell a little better. They are just cool looking. And you can also use them for smudging. I am going to be making my smudge incense cones here with a blend of lavender and sage. And I am a Christian. Lord knows I love Him and I love Jesus. Some of y'all might not be aware, and maybe that's okay, but when I smudge, I like to cast out like unclean spirits in the name of Jesus Christ to get them to leave, but sometimes they like to hang on to stuff, and I really don't like that at all. So it just makes it more of a fight to try to get them to leave my home. And I find if I smudge, I don't know if they just don't like the smell, but they tend to let go. And then when I command them to leave in the name of Jesus Christ, they leave my home much quicker. If you're sensitive and you have animals, you know when your animals are calm, and they let you know when bad juju's in the area, and they can help you to do that. Not everyone is going to believe in that stuff, but my videos are designed to help give as much information as I know it in the best way I can. So you can disregard this information if you want to, or you can accept it and hopefully it'll help you in your life. So I've got the fine powder here, and then I've got all the chunky bits which I won't be using, and this is how we're gonna go. Once you have everything powdered and ready to go, you want to go ahead and start making your recipe. Now I liked doing two scoops of lavender, and this is just a teaspoon I'm using here. So teaspoon of lavender, two teaspoons of lavender. And then I'm going to use a teaspoon of sage. I really like the smell of this blend. It just is so nice. And then I am going to use about 1/4 a teaspoon of my resin. Now there are some other herbs that are quite sticky that you can use as your glue, but I don't really have that in my lavender and sage blend, so I'm just using my tree resin. Now if you use like a rosemary lavender blend, rosemary is very sticky, so you can actually use that as your glue, and that should help hold everything together really well for you. And once you have your ingredients together, you can kind of press them and they will sort of stick to your fingers. That's what I like to use as a method to gauge when I have enough resin in my work. Now the resin has a lot of smell, so it will come out in your work. So if you don't want that, make sure you do less is more. And this is wanting to kind of firm up and do a little bit of cracking, so I'm going to use that as my stopping point. Then I'm going to go ahead, while my powder is still very dry, I'm going to use my essential oil blend. Just a few drops in there. I really like a strong scent. I'm just going to go ahead and mix it with my fingers. I'm going to feel it, check it out. If I like that, we're going to go with that. Now when you have your essential oil bottles, they do make squirt tops for them. So that way you don't have to go by a dropper and accidentally spill too much essential oil in your work. And that tends to also make sure that all your powders get evenly scented as you go. I'm going to go ahead and add my alcohol. I found this really works well to coat everything evenly. And it makes it easier to kind of stir things around. I'm going to add more alcohol. I'm just going to keep going. And this is going to be kind of like a wet-ish type sand. You want it to be able to not be soaking wet, but you definitely want it to be able to hold shape as it's starting to be able to do there. And because you're doing a little bit at a time, that will also make sure that you don't over soak it, and then it takes forever to dry that way. And I'm liking how this is feeling. I'm going to add a few more squirts to it. And I think that feels ready to go. So once you get to a point where your powdered fuels and your essential oils and your liquid binders are combined really, really well, and you can compress everything to a point where it will form up and stay that way, then you know you are ready to start making your incense cones. When you go ahead and make your cones, you're going to take your mold, your liner, get those joined up. Now you can do this by hand if you want to and shape your own cones, but I like to have some consistency in my work. So you'll pour a little bit of that powder in your mold, and then you're just going to go ahead and compress it down and make sure it gets packed all the way to the tip, because that tip is important as you will be lighting that. Now, I like to go around and feel about where that edge is at, and then once I reach that edge, then I know I'm good to remove my liner from my mold. Not quite there yet. Now that feels about right. You want to make sure that you try and get it as flat as you can. Another way you can do it is by taking your paper, folding it over, and just pressing it down that way, and that can also help you line up your base. Then you just take your paper, give your cone a little wiggle, and everything just pulls right out. Set it aside and start your other cone. Now I think for this cone I'm going to make a backflow incense cone because they just look so cool. So I've got that filled all the way to the top. That's nice and consistent. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take my awl. You can use a needle if you want to, a very thick needle. You can use a nail if you have one of those handy. And you're going to just gently line up the base of your work, or the base of the cone, and you're just going to push straight through, but not all the way. You want to leave some room at the tip, otherwise it won't burn correctly. So once I get it to about where I need it, I'm just going to go ahead and wiggle my awl, and then just slowly pull that awl back out. This helps prevent the hole or the cone from collapsing as I pull my awl back out. That way I have a nice clean hole that goes almost all the way through, so this will function as it's supposed to. When you are done with your cones, you can go ahead and just take the area where you had just taped, cut it with a pair of scissors, and then gently start to unroll your cone. You want to be careful that you don't break the tips off or anything like that. And here we've got the Backflow incense cone. I'm going to set this aside. Now one of the ways that you can make your cones dry faster is you can stick them in the oven at 170 degrees for about a half hour or so, and that will help it to dry out sooner. But if you do use that method, remember that the heat from your oven will cause your oils, if you use essential oils or anything like that, it will cause it to evaporate, so your cones won't have as strong of a scent. So air drying is definitely best for these things, but if you don't want to wait, you can use low heat in an oven and just dehydrate them until they are completely ready to go and usable. And if you do end up breaking a cone in the process, or it breaks after it's dry, you can very easily take your cone and add a little bit of rubbing alcohol in it and re-break it down and remold it, and that's not going to be hard for you to do once you have this process down. Once your incense cones are completely finished, go ahead and lay them on their side very gently so you don't break them, and then they can dry. You want that wide base to be exposed to the air, that way they can dehydrate and completely get dry all the way through. Just go ahead and set them aside then and wait about a week or so, and they should be ready to go. So I made a couple incense cones last week, and these are ready to use. This one I made out of rose petals and used some rose essential oil with it, and it just smells wonderful. I have two different types of incense burners. This is a Backflow incense burner, and this is a regular incense burner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and light the tip of the cone. Just going to let it get going real good. Then I blow out the tip and just let it smolder. Isn't that just lovely? Just look how that goes. Now I am going to go ahead, I have a Backflow incense cone I made here. I'm just going to go ahead and light the tip. Let it really get going good. We'll see, yep, it's starting to produce some smoke out the back, and that's what we want. Kind of creates a downdraft there. I'm going to blow the tip out. Then I'm going to go ahead and just place my cone on the top of my Backflow incense burner and just sit back and enjoy it. So if you guys like this video, please come on back, and I hope to see you again. And until then, you guys have a good one. Bye now.